Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. My name is Delani Febrianti. I'm from 6th semester of English Department in Universitas Islam Nusantara. For this time, I will to explain about the chapter 4, which the title Telling Tales, Grammar, the Spoken Language, and the Material Development. Descriptions of English language and of English grammar in particular have been largely based on written sources and written example. One consequence of these situations that correct grammar has to come in correct grammar as represented by the written language, and that many perfectly normal and regularly occurring utterances made by standard English speakers have by omission come to classify it as ungrammatical. The corpus, which will refer to the Can Code corpus, is a part of the Billion Word Cambridge International Corpus or CIC, and the main aim was always to construct a qualitative corpus and not simple a large quantitative corpus. It emphasized on grammatical choice according to different communicative contexts, was also designed from the outset to make it of potential use to language teachers and learners. Next, 4.2 Authentic versus script dialects. When naturally occurring language is compared with language constructed for the purposes of language teaching, market difference can be observed. A number of the utterances are incomplete or are complete by the other speakers, and the conversation is terminated without the usual ritualistically polite closing strategies found in much textbooks discourse. The script text is easier to comprehend but is unlikely to reproduce in actual context of use. The unscripted text is real English but more difficult to comprehend and to produce, and therefore likely to be considered less appropriate pedagogically. Pedagogical issues are clearly central, which is in any case only an extract from a much broader pedagogically rich sequence of material sensitively key to learning requirement at a particular stage in language development. 4.3 What is tell? Tell are almost exclusive to the spoken language, and where they do occur in written English, they are selected in order to give that written text or markedly spoken character. Such form presents therefore a particular challenge to the material designer wishing to provide teachers and learners with an opportunity to encounter a key features of spoken language in use. Next, 4.4 Grammar patterns and grammar as choice. Some questions. In the case of narrative, it is difficult to envisage that any tale in which tale were selected to emphasize every event would be judged to be especially telling. Telling tales mean drawing attention to key events of the fictional or represent world, highlighting them for the listener within the overall narrative structures. In teaching this form, it will be essential to begin introduction of them beyond the sentence. Therefore, but for learner also to understand the structural constraint outlined at the start of these sections. As not, these structural constraints are relatively straightforward to articulate as a rule. The delicate matters of choosing when to use them is more complex. 4.5 Sample materials. If we accept that tiles are normal, rather than a deviant future of spoken grammar, and we accept that learners ought to be introduced to tales as an expressive resource and be guided in their choice of whether, how, and in what way to use tales, then teaching materials will need to address such conditions. And then 4.6, evaluating materials for spoken grammar teachings. According to Hodges 2010, Chapter 3 and Hodges 2010 Part B, he considered that our position in 2000 was to maintain a realistic pedagogic positions, introducing and exposing students to authentic language wherever possible, whilst recognizing that there are dangers in not balancing spoken and written English and in not selecting example which can be processed by students without undue cognitive or cultural difficulty. Our position in 2010 is one of even stronger advocacy of corpus informed material for the classroom, but still one of careful selections of language data according to pedagogic judgment of learner need. Next, 4.7, language awareness and consciousness raising. Communicative teaching, in spite of numerous pedagogic advantage, is not encouraged in student habit of observations, noticing, or conscious exploration of grammatical form and functions, and the relevant SLR research has sought to some extent to examine the consequences of a rebalanced methodology. Work in spoken grammar is still in the early stage both of development and of systematic formal identifications and descriptions. It is likely to that researches into grammatical choice will present some areas of grammars, not in terms of yes or no, alternative, alternative or categorical imperative, but rather in terms of co-occurrence probabilities. That is, learners will acquire an understanding that particular form from belong in some spoken rather than in written context of use, and that their selections will entail a more interactive, interpersonal, and affective orientations. 4.8 is the sting in the tale modifying the authentic. The essential pedagogic question is faced by any material writer with access to a corpus of naturally occurring data and with a commitment to using such data for the purposes of teaching and learning. The basic issues was polarized above when authentic and specifically script dialogue were juxtaposed. It seems from such comparisons that learners can benefit from exposures to dialogue which are artificially constructed for learning purposes. However, learners should not be prevented from accessing the kind of authentic data from real conversational dialogue, conversational discourse, collecting as a part of the Can Code project and other similar corpora. 4.9, Head or Tails, toward an interpersonal grammar for learners. Head occurs at the beginning of clause. Head orient the listener to what is to follow and function to organize and structure the message before. Its main content is communicated. Tails are a little more directly interpersonal in function since they provide a more personal attitude, denote, or evaluate stance toward for the message after its main ideational content has been communicated. Head can of course include attitudinal matter, but the main purposes remain one of providing orientations. Learning how to select and use head and tail is an important component in competence in the spoken language, and observing and reacting appropriately to them is an important component in active listening and an appropriate response to much spoken discourse. Learning how to form and to use tails and head is important part of learning how to establish and maintain interpersonal relationship and through language. Descriptions will need to take account of evaluations, emphasize formality and listener discourse knowledge, and will additionally require some explanatory context building which goes beyond the confines and limits of a sentence into the formation of meanings across speaking turns. And the last 4.10 rules, probabilities, choice, and the hegemony of the native speaker. Grammatical rules exist. They have been extensively codified and form the core in the structures of the language, both spoken and written. There are areas of meaning which are selected within the grammar. The choice of a correctly formed active or a correctly formed passive laws. It can be argued that the pedagogic provisions in the EFL or ESL classroom of variable probabilistic rules is a preoccupations root in native speaker modeling of target language learning. The concern for spoken grammar on the part of native speakers pedagogists could simply be dismissed as extensions of native speaker hegemony in English language teaching and learning contexts, which undermines the position of non-native speakers teachers who, whilst expert speakers of the language, are less likely to be familiar with all the subtle value-laden and culture-embedded nuance of native speaker communications. Learners should not be disempowered, and syllabus should not be deliberately improvised. Learning a language should also, in a part at least, involve developing something of a feel for that language. Learners who concentrate on the more rule-bound and referential domains are unlikely to develop the kind of sensitive personal response and effect which probably underlie feel and which go some way to helping them discover, understand, and begin to internalize the expressive as well as the referential resource of a language. Okay, everyone, that's all from me. I'm sorry if there are any mistake when the present the material. Thanks for attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.